This is number 7 on section 8.1. So far we've done the hypothesis test with the p-value method. This is going to ask us to do the hypothesis test with the critical value method. So if you look at your steps, if you notice, steps 1 through 5 are still the same, but instead of doing the p-value method, we're going to go along and do the critical value method. And that's where we'll make our judgment on whether to fail or to reject our null. So let's go back over here. It says this gives us the test statistic, so it's already done part of our job for us. We don't have to do step 5, but I'm still going to start with step 1 is write our claim. So this is a test statistic of z equals negative 3.31 is obtained when testing the claim that p is less than 0.55. So that's our claim. Step 2 is write the opposite of the claim. So p is going to be greater than or equal to 0.55. That's the opposite, and then remember we always change the or equals to strictly equals. So when we go down to write our null in our alternative hypothesis, the null has the equals to, and then the alternative is the less than. And then go ahead and star whichever one was the original was the less than. So in this case, our alternative hypothesis is our original claim. So that's steps 1, 2, and 3. Step 4 says write the level of significance. So this is telling us our level of significance is 0.05, and draw the appropriate curve. Okay, we're dealing with proportion, so we're on a normal distribution. From our alternative hypothesis, this is less than, it tells us which tailed we are. Less than is going to be left-tailed. So that means we're on this side, the left side of our bell curve. If this was greater than, we would be right-tailed. And then we did a two-tailed earlier. If it was not equal to, it would be two-tailed. So we need to find our critical value so that we can then test it against the test statistic. Now when you're testing it, the unshaded region is representing the null hypothesis, and the shaded region is representing the alternative hypothesis. So to find this test statistic, you do the same thing as we did in the last section using our alpha. So this area is 0.05. If it was two-tailed, we'd have to divide that by 2, and it would be 0.025 like we had to do in chapter 6 and 7. But for this case, this is, since it's left-tailed, we use the alpha as your area or probability. So when we go to StatCrunch, you're going to go to Stat, Calculators, Normal, and then we're less than, and put your area in there. If you were right-tailed, you would change that to greater than. So that looks like the picture I drew. So my critical value is going to be negative 1.64. So ZCV is negative 1.64. Now the next part jumps right to whether we reject or fail to reject, and then the conclusion statement. So before we do that, we need to look at our picture and the test statistic that they gave us. So finding the test statistic is step 5. They've already done that for us. So step 5 is taking our test statistic, ZTS, which they say is negative 3.31, and we compare it to our critical value. So our critical value is right here. That's negative 1.64. Negative 3.31 is going to fall way over here somewhere. So it falls in the alternative hypothesis area, which means if you look at your sheet, step 7, or just by looking at it, if it's not in the null, you're going to reject the null. If it was in, if this number was like negative 1.5 and it was over here, we would fail to reject the null. But since it's on the in the shaded area, we're going to reject the null. So let's go. If you look here, we failed to reject, and then to get your final conclusion statement, that's step 8, you have to know where the original claim was. And our original claim, remember, was in the alternative hypothesis. So my claim was found in the H1 and I rejected the null, so there is sufficient evidence to support the claim. So I rejected. There is sufficient evidence to support the claim.